Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators. So, up until this point of our show or podcast, we have shown the operator side of special operations. Well, there's a whole nother side, the family, and that's what we're going to get into today. My guest's name is Michelle Black, and she is the author of Sacrifice, The Green Berets, A Fateful Ambush, and A Gold Star Widow's Fight for the Truth. Michelle's husband was killed in action in 2017 in Niger, Africa. A lot of things went on. A lot of things were covered up and brought to the light due to Michelle's intense efforts to get to the bottom of what happened with her husband. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. And I hope it sheds a whole new light on the differences and everything else that goes into the life that we lead. Thank you guys for listening and enjoy the show. Michelle Black, welcome to Lesser Known Operators. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
For the people that caught the first part of that conversation, I was just saying that my copy of Sacrifice is black and yours on the audiobook is white there. But Michelle Black, the author of Sacrifice, The Green Berets, A Fateful Ambush, and A Gold Star Widow's Fight for the Truth. And as I said earlier, I bought your book twice, so digitally I have another copy. But thank you for coming on. I'm very excited to talk to you and to hopefully give you a good experience from a proper Green Beret interviewing a Gold Star spouse.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Honestly, I always love getting to speak with actual operators because they understand the subject so much more. So not that I don't love to interview, in general and speak to people about the story, but there's a depth of knowledge to just how the operational world of Green Berets works. So it's fun.
Yeah, there's an understanding. It's like a fraternity, right? Because we all went through this incredibly difficult thing. And when you talk to the guys, and especially because your husband and I graduated about 5 or 6 months apart. So we were in the schoolhouse at the same time. We went through relatively the same training, although his was quite a bit more shitty than mine because he was a Delta and I was a Charlie, and just completely different experience in school there. And we'll get into that because you saw the times that he would come home ragged from training, and a couple stories in the book about there. The one pissed my wife off. She's like, "How could this happen?" And I said, "It just can." And when you're a student, you don't have the same rights, even though he's a sergeant, right? Mm-hmm. This cadre is God. Because you said that was your first introduction to maybe the Army or the military doesn't actually care about my husband, right? Or that's what I got the feeling of.
Yeah, when he was doing that all-night exercise and him and the cadre did not see eye to eye. Bryan was always one of those people that you either really like him and respect him or you absolutely hated him because he was very black and white and he said exactly what he thought. And if it wasn't good, you were going to hear it anyway. So I think something kicked off with this cadre. He probably told him exactly what he thought. And Bryan also had the issue, which a lot of Green Berets do. They care about rank, but if they think you need to hear it, they're going to tell you regardless of rank. So I think that's what kicked it off, I'm sure. And so this cadre had been an issue throughout the course, and now it was his chance to finish Bryan off on the last night. So he had Bryan carrying some heavy dummy up and down these stairs throughout the night until Bryan was collapsing out of thirst and dehydration. And so Bryan was sneaking behind trees where guys were giving him, against the cadre's orders, giving him water or what do you call it? Giving him, gosh, I'm just now forgetting, but, basically giving him water and whatever behind the scenes. And so by the time Bryan got home, he was so dehydrated that he essentially had, he was peeing the color of Coke. And so he knew his body and his organs were going to shut down. And so he came in and instantly wanted me to give him, I might need you to remind me. I'm forgetting now what that
An
is.
IV?
Yeah, give him an IV. And so I remember him coming in and literally like falling through the door that night. Gosh, it must have been like, it was late. And I set him down on the floor and he's shaking and he's the wrong color. And I had to give him an IV in the middle of our kitchen. And which I have no medical background. He had to walk me through it. And then I'm making him a sandwich and we were going through bags of IVs. Unfortunately, he was a medic. That's what an 18 Delta is. So he had all these supplies. And basically, in order to basically best this cadre, he had to give himself his own medical treatment, because if he were to walk into a hospital and say, I have rhabdo, he would have automatically been kicked out of not only the course, but he would have probably been kicked out of the Army, because it's a very serious condition. So we had to treat him, and he was down for several days, just trying to recover from having rhabdo. And you can imagine I was irate. And I remember threatening going up to his superiors, and Bryan basically swore me to secrecy, and I was a mess. I wanted to, have somebody's career, but that would have done the opposite. Probably nobody would have been held accountable, and Bryan would have actually lost his career, because then it would have been, he needs to go to the hospital and get checked out, and it would have led to his rhabdo being discovered. So,
Yeah, stuff like that can definitely happen, because the cadre are people too, and that guy could just be an asshole, and then he meets your husband and they don't like each other, and that's a great career, or not a great career. It's a common trait for Green Berets, is they'll just tell you exactly what they're thinking, whether it's good or bad for them at all times. And cadre in the course. And I know the exercise you're talking about, and you're right. If you go down with a heat stroke or rhabdo or something like that, it could all be for nothing. And I remember similar experience I had. I had heat stroke, way overheated, and the cadre just comes up to me and goes, if you fall, you're out. So we had like another mile to go in the march, and I'm cold and I'm throwing up. And then that's all he said, because he knew. He's like, I have to do something. And he was on my side. He's like, you just got to make it to camp, and then I can give you an IV and I can put the cold bag on you. And I made it. Don't do well in the heat now. So guys will sacrifice their health down the road just to pass the course. Is that Bryan's attitude going through the course?
oh yeah, he was like, you can kill me before I quit. I don't care. So, yeah.
Oof. That's tough for some people that haven't experienced something like that in their life, because you're seeing it from the spouse's perspective, right? He goes and does these things, and you really didn't learn all the shit that was going on until after the events went down, and you started learning everything about special forces. And I mean, you got chain of command, you got training in there, you've got a whole thing on acronyms. So you learned everything after the fact. What was it like being a spouse when he's going through that training?
I think I learned to, probably similar to what operators have to do, right? Like, you have to separate your mind and body from what's going on. So I'd have to take whatever he's doing and set it aside and not even think about it or think about him until he's home. So until he's present, I can't think about him, because if I do, it affects me with the kids, because I'm raising a kid on the autism spectrum. I've got all these things going on, and my goal is to keep everything at home stable and safe, and, moving along the way it should. So then he cannot worry about us and not think about us and just focus. And I know if he comes home and something's amiss, then he's going to think about us more the next time he's gone. So what I need to do is not think about him while he's gone, so he cannot think about us while he's gone. And then when he comes back, that's when you learn all these things and you deal with it then. And same with him. If anything's off, he has to come home, deal with it then, and then separate out the next time he leaves.
Yeah, it's a continuous, and it came up when I was reading your book, right? It's just a continuous sacrifice on the family's part, right? because your husband's already in the military, and yes, he's sacrificing the future of this one military path for another one, and he's going to go this direction. But the family is often having to share that burden with no knowledge of the understanding of the end state, what it means to them. They just have to share along with it and support. Did you have any doubt that your husband was, or what he was getting himself into and the end state that he was striving towards while he was doing this?
I think you always are aware that that's a possibility. Does it seem like I mean, can you really connect with that reality being an end? Kind of like what happens in the end? No, I don't think you really can, but I think that's kind of a self-protection thing you do. But when someone signs up for the military that, that's a chance. And Bryan was big into statistics and odds and whatever. I mean, he was a chess player and all of this. So he was really good at strategy and knowing numbers and odd. Oh, and he played poker for a living for a while. So he really was into odds. So he would always tell me, I have a bigger chance of dying in a car wreck on the way to and from work than I do in any deployment. But I mean, I'm in Africa. There's like, a handful of people who have died there on deployments ever. So, I mean, the reality is that the odds of him dying over there were very slim. I mean, next to nothing. But we also always joke that he had really bad luck because when he played poker for a living, I mean, he was really good at what he did. He called all the right hands and he lost way more than he should have. So that was kind of our running joke, is like the odds of you dying in Africa are really terrible, but you also have really terrible luck. So, hey, you never know.
That's really dark, knowing how things turned out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's it. That's how we get through things that are really hard to deal with, is dark humor, and just kind of trying to make light of this situation. I guess, most people wouldn't understand that. But if you can't laugh at it later on, then it's really going to eat away at you. You guys were together before Bryan joined the military, right?
We were, yes.
Was the commitment to service, or more that healthcare aspect? Because you had spoke, your son was on the autism factor. Did that all play into the decision you guys made together for him to join?
Yeah, it was a lot of things. So when I first met Bryan, his dad was a Marine, an officer in the Marines for years. So Bryan was actually raised an Army brat. He always had it in the back of his mind that he wanted to be a Navy SEAL, something along those lines. But when we met, we'd both been to college and were just up in a ski resort playing around. I had no interest in being like a military family member or in the military. I was raised as far from it as possible. And so, I just assumed we were good. And then Bryan, of course, I knew that was something he always kind of wanted. So when the 2008 crash happened and all of a sudden we're a young family, we're struggling, and, the medical benefits at that point, we just looked at it and went, this makes sense. We've got a kid on the spectrum. I have a seizure disorder, so I needed to be able to see doctors whenever I needed. And he just kind of was like, well, how about I go in the Army? And I think sometimes I wonder if that was his way around, like, see, I'm not going to be a Navy SEAL. I'm just going to go in the Army and we'll make an agreement. I'll just be in 4 years. He probably had a long-term plan that he knew he could convince me of down the road, which totally worked. So about a year into the Army, he just went, and I'm bored. I want to go to, SFAS. So that's, yeah.
That boredom in the regular Army, I know what that's all about. That sets in pretty quickly, where you go, especially if you're a high performer, like your husband was. Immediately you go, this isn't enough. I got to do something else. And that briefings every month at the library for selection. They come out, there's a Green Beret, talks to you and says how great it's going to be. You don't actually know what you're getting yourself into, but sounds cool. Lots cooler than standing in formation on Sunday because somebody got a DUI or wrecked their car or something like that. what was it like for him going to selection, training up and going there and leaving? Because this is the first time, because he's been to basic and all that and a couple field training things there, but now we're going to selection. There's got to be a lot of buildup because you had said he always wanted to be either a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret, but now going to selection, it's got to be a different mindset, right?
It is. Yeah. It was interesting to watch him go into training mode because, really we had gone from, I knew he had been into MMA. He told me he was a cage fighter. I'd never seen it, and he was into wrestling and jujitsu and all that junk. So I knew he trained pretty high when he was younger physically. But then, he pretty much sat in front of a computer and played poker for a living for a few years and then went in the army and just kind of, like you said, formations and pretty basic. All of a sudden he was, just performing at a level I'd never seen. He was 24/7 every single day during the week, either learning orienteering or going on hours long ruck marches or running for hours. He just was gone all the time training. And it was pretty incredible. So yeah, the training was pretty remarkable.
It's like a switch, right? Because I've said on the show before, people that are going to make it to the graduation, get their beret, are going to make it no matter what. Nothing going to stop. We go back to that cadre, right? Man, you're going to have to kill me. I'm not going to quit. There's nothing going to stop me from getting my beret. I know exactly what you're talking about. There's just this sense of I can do this, and there is no obstacle that you could put in my way, all the way up into death, right? No amount of uncomfort that can stop me from getting here. What was it like when he gets back from selection and has made it?
Well, ours was a little different. Of course, he's ecstatic. He disappears for however long it was. And, I know I'm not going to hear from him until it's either, hey, I failed or, hey, I made it. And it was Bryan. Like you said, the kind of people who are going to make it, you know ahead of time. Unless he got injured, I knew he'd make it. So he called, I made it, cool. Like he's ecstatic. He comes home. But of course, he's really sick because he managed to get listeria. So there was a listeria outbreak before he left. And for some stupid reason, he was craving cantaloupes. And he was down at Walmart every single day buying a cantaloupe and eating it. And of course, we didn't think you need to wash it because the rind, whatever, would not, nothing's going to get through to the cantaloupe. Well, of course, whatever's on the rind is on your fingers. So he got listeria and he would have been fine, except he went to selection, beat his body down, and of course got sick with listeria. So he was violently sick by the time he got home. So he lost all this weight at SFAS and continued to lose weight after he got home, probably dropping another, I would guess, somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds easy. So, but fortunately, his team or his unit was getting ready, gearing up to go on deployment. And they were handing out antibiotics because we couldn't get the hospital to take him seriously. Because, a young male who's in his 30s and in great physical shape shouldn't have listeria. So the military hospital, of course, just kind of laughed him off. So I remember pulling up there multiple times with him, both ends just spewing, and him running in and begging them for help and them just saying, you're fine. It's just, 24-hour flu. And I'm in the parking lot with babies hoping he makes it out like until 2-3 in the morning. And then he comes out and says, yeah, they didn't help me. And so finally, after several weeks, his unit had handed out antibiotics and he was like, thank God. And I was like, we could just take you to a regular hospital in town and then just put it on a credit card and then pay it off. But we didn't have money. And our health insurance should have covered it. But of course, the military is not taking you seriously. So fortunately, like I said, he got antibiotics and just started taking those right away. And then, of course, the listeria was gone within a few days. But that was after a few weeks of suffering.
I was reading that story and I said, oh, has he got rhabdo? Because I'm reading it or listening, and it's like, has he got rhabdo? And then you go back into listeria. And then you got into trying to get the military hospital, the doctor to take it seriously. I got a rare form of strep G when I was a private. getting ready for selection. I'm getting ready for selection. And this contributed to maybe why I didn't pass the first time, because I hurt my knee, but I don't know if I was ready physically, because I had been sick. I got this form of strep G. Doctors couldn't find it, and because they're doing test after test. Well, that turned into a staph infection all over my face, down my front, inside, and outside. So I've got now a staph infection. I mean, they're throwing everything at it except medicine. And they're saying, well, we think, take this. And so I think I got to a point where I hadn't had any water or food in like 3 or 4 days. And I started hallucinating. And finally, on I think the second or third trip to the emergency room, and one of my best friends, Alex Booth, going to listen to this. He tells the story much better than I do, and it's much more horrific than I'm giving it. But the Army didn't take it seriously. I said I had syphilis at one point, and finally, the doctor gives me some penicillin, and it got better for a couple hours, and then they gave no follow-up medicine, and I got back in the hospital. And the Army tried to kill me. They just tried to do away with me somehow by neglecting that I was even sick, or acknowledging that I'm sick. So I was listening to that story and going, it's the exact same thing. That's a common thing through the military is, just take some Tylenol, drink some water, and you'll be fine. And then it gets out of control. That could have very easily just, ended in disaster. What were you thinking about the Army medical system at that time?
Oh, at that point, I just thought it was like they don't care, they don't hear, they're hugely negligent. And the fact that like it occurred to me, and it occurred to me too after some conversations I'd had with doctors and the way they treated me, I thought they think they're dealing with kind of the dumbest people on earth. And so if you say I'm sick, they assume you've got a cold. And no matter what you tell them, they don't believe you because you're just an idiot. And so at that point, I didn't trust the Army or military doctors whatsoever. And I'm still that way. If they tell me I need surgery, I get a second opinion outside of the military hospitals, always. And most of the time that proves that I'm right. I don't need surgery. That's happened a couple times where they're like, oh, you need to get surgery on this. And then later I'm thinking, I think those doctors wanted a chance to try out doing that surgery. I don't think I needed that surgery. So when they are willing to do certain things, that's what I assume it's because they want to give it a try. Because usually they want to put in as little effort as possible and as little money as possible, for sure. Which is ridiculous because, antibiotics, the basics aren't going to cost that much. I remember going in with the kids to see a doctor, and just the way they would talk down to me, and it blew my mind. I thought they must think because I am an enlisted man's wife that I'm not educated and that I come from a trailer park and have no intelligence. Because I would walk in and the things they would tell me where I'm like, I'm just needing to get my kids checked out. I need to get a speech, a speech therapy, say like referral or something. Instead, I would be lectured about how my kids needed to eat healthy, not just junk food all the time, and how they needed to not be on electronics all the time or watch any TV, watch much TV. I need to limit it to 2 hours a day. And the ironic thing was I'm very, very, I was raised where you eat all homemade food. You don't eat junk food, period. So everything was organic, all homemade. The kids did not watch TV. They would be lucky if they got an hour a day, maybe. But nobody spoke to me about that. My kids read books. They didn't watch TV or game, or they weren't on devices. But you were spoke down to like you were, just the scum of the earth. And it blew my mind.
I've said this a few times the first one is if the military wanted you to have a family, they would issue it to you. That's a common saying in the military. And the second one is no matter what the military says, they don't care about you or your family. All these programs that there are put out there to bolster their image of saying, we take care of families and we want the best for all this stuff. What's your thoughts on that? Does the military in itself, the government, really care about the families, or do they just want the soldier to be doing the job, and this is a thing that they have to deal with to keep them going along?
Yeah, that's more accurate, especially when you're talking. So there's a big difference between big army and special operations community, right? I noticed when I got into USASOC, um, there were certain like USASOC commanders that I've met over the years that they're phenomenal. They do care. They care about the families. They go above and beyond to take care of the families and make sure, even once you're a gold star, that you're well taken care of. Big army, no, they don't care at all. You're a number, and they are doing things for just publicly their public image and how that looks. But no, they're not doing their best to take care of families. I mean, I would love it if that were the truth, but it just isn't. I definitely, especially after getting out, love that since Bryan's been gone, we get more options. So I can, as far as medical goes, like I can go to PAC Med or other facilities that are non-military, and the level of care is just far beyond what I got in the military. And if I have an opinion or a thought, it's actually considered because it's my health and my body, and they listen to me and believe me and don't treat me like, oh, I'm just an idiot. I'm not a doctor, so I can't possibly know anything. So yeah, the level of care outside the military is much superior for sure.
That's kind of shitty to say, but it's because it's for profit too, right? On the outside,
Yeah.
they want that insurance money. The military, there's no incentive for anything, because everybody's still in the military as well. It's just a different dynamic. The people in the military may care about you, but the position really doesn't. Let's veer off on a tangent real quick, because I've seen another one of my good friends, Gold Star spouse, was talking about this. Is your healthcare and the kids, well, your kids are older now, but specifically yours, since your husband was killed in the line of duty, what are your restrictions on, let me see if I can get her post up in my head, on maintaining your healthcare through the rest of your life?
Oh, it depends on whether I get married again. And if I get married again, I get absolutely nothing. So Bryan's retirement is gone. The survivor benefit plan he paid into is gone. The insurance, all benefits are gone. I can't even have a card to go on base anymore. So I am essentially the sacrifices and services that, the service and the sacrifices my family made don't matter if I get remarried. So
Married to a dead man forever.
yeah, I mean, whether I was 20 when he died, or, in my case, I was 39, it doesn't matter. Like, until I am 56 years old, I am bound to my dead husband. Or I have to walk away, and that's fine. Like, I have to, find my own income, but that's hard when you're talking about starting out at 38, 39. A lot of us are in our 30s when we lose our spouses, especially in the Green Beret community, because they're older, because they have to go through all this training, extra training. So most guys don't go into special forces until they're somewhere between the ages of 28 and 32, right? So, because by the time you go into regular military, then try out, then go through the 4 to 5 years of training and all that, you're older. So most of us are in our 30s to 40s when we lose our spouses in the Green Beret community. And so then it's like, okay, so I'm in my 30s or 40s, and I'm trying to find a new career that will now support me and also build up basically a retirement plan, because I've now lost it all. Especially if I meet someone and I want to get remarried, I have nothing because Bryan died. And if he were still alive and we got divorced, I could get remarried and still keep some of his retirement. Whatever I got in the settlement from our divorce, I would keep forever. So I actually have less benefits as a gold star than I would have as an ex-wife.
I can imagine, but that's got to infuriate you, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not that many gold star special forces wives out there. And for me, it's Bryan literally, when I look at what he did, which isn't in the book because we hadn't seen the full video. Now we've got the full video. The military has the full video. And in the full video, you see him, Jeremiah asks Bryan, what do we do? And this is as the trucks are about to roll out. And Bryan turns around and says, because he's the lead of the truck, and he says, we need to stay behind. So Bryan orders the truck to stay behind, moves it into a blocking, like is out front, waving it into a blocking position so that they can provide cover fire to draw fire in and allow the rest of the guys to get out. And then, of course, they all stay behind and die. So he chose to sacrifice himself for everybody else. But the military can't recognize that or respect that with his family in the aftermath. And Bryan believed that we would be taken care of. That's why he was willing to do that. And that blows my mind. And his dad, as a Marine officer, wasn't aware of this either, that we would lose everything if I ever got remarried. So, because I've recently been dating someone, because it's been 7 years, almost 8. And now, Bryan's dad is like, what do you do? Because if this was my wife, Karen, Bryan's mom, he goes, I would have been irate. And it's not fair that my son did all of this and gave his life, and yet all of his earnings and everything he put on the line and assumed would go to you now is at risk because you met somebody else. And he goes, I don't want it to stop you from having a future, and like a happy future. That's not fair, because that's what I would want for Karen if I had died in action. So yeah, you get pretty upset.
Oh, I imagine. When I read it the first time, I was upset. So it's not easier, but I knew what you were going to say, right? But everybody listening to this, 99% of the people listening to this have no idea what you were going to say there. Is there anything being done movement-wise to correct this?
I think TAPS has been working away at it. I think the trick is, and I think a big fight, it's money, right? So they've expanded the definition of gold star, which everybody fights over whether or not they agree, disagree, because now it includes everything from sickness to suicide to, so, and originally it was just KIA. So as you expand the definition of gold star, which I agree with, because you want everybody to receive, all these nonprofits, right, that now exist and bring in hundreds of millions of dollars a year to do things for gold stars. Well, if there's only 5,000 of us, it's a large amount, but when you're talking about, and we've talked about this, like, let's say my husband deploys, he gets killed. All these guys have PTSD from it. And one of them, it's not like they're less of heroes, and they come home and, because of the effects of PTSD and their time overseas and seeing so many friends lost, they take their own lives. Does that make them less of a hero and their wife deserve less than the gold star rating? And that's the big debate, right? But because of that, it has expanded the definition of what gold stars are, which means it expands the government's financial responsibility to take care of more people for a longer period of time. And so that's what it comes down to, is numbers. Is they are hoping that more of us would just say, okay, I give up, I'm getting remarried. And then that's one less person they have to pay for.
Yeah, the government's a system, right? And you're a human, and they'll outlast you. And the only way they're going to do anything is if a mass amount of people bring awareness to something and they have to change. We saw that with the PACT Act, right? It got so much traction so fast because there's so many veterans suffering from these things. They had to do something. This is what's, like, as you said, 5,000. How many gold star spouses are there? You probably have an accurate number.
I have no idea. I just know that there are, I think I say 5,000 because I think, okay, how many people died in action in the last 20 years during the, Afghanistan um, war, right? Or whatever, since 9/11. I think it's around 5,000. I could be wrong, but I think that's about the right number. Um, like I said, I don't really know, but let's say that those people were all killed in action. They were all married. Let's say there's 5,000, Gold Star spouses from KIA. Um, but you look at the numbers of sickness due to toxic, exposure to toxins and all of that, and suicide, and the number just explodes. So how many total? I can't really say. I mean, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. And if they expand the definition, then obviously that number is going to grow. So that's a bigger population they have to deal with. And if it stays small, they don't have to deal with it. There's very few voices because nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
I only know about it because it happened. My buddy died and his spouse has been posting about the restrictions placed on her. And I'm just seeing this on Facebook where, there's nobody standing on stage and talking to thousands of people about it. So it's just something that needs to get out there more. I feel very strongly about it. And maybe this little piece will inform a couple more people about it and some more people. But that's, one thing. As soon as you said that about healthcare, I wanted to go off and talk about that because statistically, nobody knows about it.
No, and people don't. What they typically think is like, oh, this is the spouse. This affects the spouse, right? So, well, she can handle it. Well, what they don't look at is it's a whole family. So this is, this is affecting. It would affect my kids. So let's say I meet someone great, and I did, and he wants to teach the boys to hunt and fish, and this is awesome. And my boys, now they're 16 and 18. They have someone to ask like man questions to, and so it's amazing. But like, let's say we get married. Now I can't afford to pay for my kids to get their driver's licenses. I can't afford for my kids to get car insurance, and I definitely can't afford to buy them cars. And right now they're sharing a car. I really can't afford the insurance for it because it's expensive for teenagers to drive. It's like 300 and something for each kid to have insurance. And it's like $800 to put them through driver's training and take all of the, so that's the thing. It doesn't just affect me. It affects my kids, which are Bryan's kids. So should his kids be negatively impacted? Because he died when they were 9 and 11. And I waited a long time until I found someone who I trusted with them and who I knew he would trust with them. And they're getting that dad experience, but should they be punished because of that? And now I can't feed them as well. And I can't give them all of the things that I could give them before because now Bryan's retirement is gone back to the government because I met somebody great. You know what I mean? It's pretty insane.
Yeah, I don't even know if I have words to put into context for that because it's just wrong, right? And I mean, you described possible, up to like a Medal of Honor citation, right? Of we're going to stop. We're doing what we think is right to stop a force from overwhelming the other guys, a Distinguished Service Cross or at least a Silver Star. And that didn't turn out. We'll get into that later. But to just be the family abandoned, kind of, if this happens, and if they had not, as you said, less rights than if things had gone a different way. It's just upsetting, very upsetting. And hopefully the more people talk about it, just like some other things that I talk about, hopefully get more ears on the subject and it'll get to a bigger movement. So, but I really feel for you there. And it's, and it's wrong. So hopefully we can change some sort of things like that. Kind of going back into the course, right? I know from my perspective, getting my beret, it's wow. What's it like from the spouse's perspective to see, because you've seen him go out, come back ragged, go out, come back ragged in this constant training cycle, and then finally to put on a tab and a Green Beret. What's it like from the spouse's perspective of going through all that to come to that end?
I think it's interesting coming from, especially the outside, and your wife can probably attest to this. When you marry the person because of them being who they are, and you already know that they're capable, like you don't doubt when they go in that they're going to get through and that they're going to make it and earn their tab. And for you, I think it would be different if I had just gone in and married a Green Beret. I would have been very proud of myself. Like, look at, I got myself a Green Beret. But like, it wasn't that. I just loved Bryan, and so watching him get to earn something that he wanted so bad and he worked so hard for, I was so happy for him and I was so proud of him. But sitting there in the arena that day, or Crown Coliseum, and big room, and you realize, they stand up and at the very end, you all sing the Ballad of the Green Beret. And it was very, very sobering because the last few lines are, and I think you guys you're down there, you're doing it. This is a big deal. Yeah. You've got your Green Beret on, you're singing it. And when it hits the spouses, what you're singing, and it's reverberating off the walls, and you realize, yeah, out of Bryan's original group at SFAS, there probably are only 3 now out of the 100, wearing the Green Beret. So, because it says 100 men will test today, only 3 will win the Green Beret. And you realize there's a small little class down there, and my husband's part of it. But what he's singing is that, back at home, there I am waiting, and he's met his fate. And now he wants me to raise our kids to now do the same thing. And like, that was hard.
Mm. Yeah, I got, yeah, it's interesting because even when we're going through it on our side, you're not really thinking about it because you're so focused on, you can't pull your mind away to even think about your family and how this life's going to affect them. Because if you deviate from succeeding at what you're trying to do at all and bring that into your life, you're going to fail. You're going to be pulled off to the side and fail. So it's something we don't think about. And a lot of guys will sacrifice their family along the way to just continue that life. And it is too bad when the people that supported us are there. But yeah, or it doesn't work out and things like that. I kind of got a little off there, but you don't think about the words in the song and what's happening all in the moment, right? It affects everybody differently. But you guys graduate. He's got his beret and his tab, and then you're staying at Fort Bragg, going over to 3rd Group. And I believe in the book he said he went to the B team right away once he got to group.
Yeah, so he graduated, I want to say April or May 2015. I probably have the actual date in the book because I looked at the pictures and made sure everything matched up, and all of my notes. But yeah, he pretty much instantly deployed to Afghanistan, which he loved because he's B team. He's back at base. When he goes out, it's not for fighting or whatever. It's just to explore and, whatever. I mean, Bryan was all about, getting his chance to get in a fight, which you guys all are. But I think that was just kind of a fun trip for him. B team. And I can't remember which part of Afghanistan he was in. But yeah, he went straight to Afghanistan for a few months, maybe 3 or 4. And then he came back and went straight to Ranger School. So it just was, that year was nuts. I hardly saw him for about a year after he graduated. Maybe longer, actually, 1.5 years.
Yeah, and we've talked about it on here a lot of the time. There's no home time once you get to group. You're either getting ready for a deployment, deploying, going to school, doing something, ridiculous, tasking or things like that, and you'll get, a week here, a week there when you're on a team, and then Ranger School comes up. That's 3 months, 2 to 3 months away from home. What was your expectation for him once he got to group? Because it's really a shock to the system once you walk into the company area, and then it's just go, 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 especially at that time. What was your guys' expectation and compared to how it turned out to be? from graduation to getting to group?
I think in my mind, and I didn't really discuss it with him, I just assumed he would, great, he's at group. He might have a 6-month deployment here and there. And then, you know what I mean? But other than that, he's going to have a regular work schedule. Like I'll finally have a husband who's, works from 9 to 5 or 5 to 9, but at least he's home at night, and maybe an occasional morning I'll see him, but no, that's not what happened. Like you said, you don't see each other. So he did that first deployment right away, was gone for whatever it was, 3 or 4 months, got home, was home for maybe a few weeks, maybe a month. I don't really remember, because he left right away to Ranger School. In fact, he left so quickly to Ranger School that we didn't have any list of what, normally you're hooked in, like everyone prepares, they're all ready. You're hooked into a Facebook group where you can all discuss, the wives discuss what's going on. You get updates. We had no information. He just left. So I didn't knew nothing until he called me angry one day, like a month in, where's my food? And I was like, what food? And he goes, why aren't you here? I'm like, where? And he's like, it's family day and I need my box of food. I'm eating everybody else's food. And so that's kind of when I figured like, oh, there's an actual like list of information I should have had before he left, but he left so quick that he was just gone, and he was gone for 3 months. So yeah, he had like a 10-minute phone call where he was just like, get out a pen and paper. I need, first it was the list of food he needed, and it was very specific. He needed, brownies with this, that, and the other. And I had to be a specific brand. And then he wanted me to get peanut butter, and it was the squeezed peanut butter from Justin's, and it had to be the almond butter, raw, nothing else. And then he wanted these certain crackers, but they could only be this brand. And I mean, and he's like, did you get that all down? And he goes, you need to put it in a box. This is the address, and you need to send it on this date. And, do not, everything else, like you come to the graduation if you can, that'd be good. But you have to be here with this food by this date. You have to send the package. And I was like, geez, okay. So he went through that 3 months, graduated April 1st, 2016, I guess. Because that was a year after his Green Beret graduation, and he graduated on my birthday. I took him home. He automatically got put onto ODA 3212. And then after that, May 15th, he left for a 6-month deployment to Maradi, Niger. And he got back Halloween night, 2016. And I think we went on a vacation in December. And then he had to come back and do his Jade Helm training, which was maybe a month. I think he did a total maybe 3 months worth of training that year. And I can't remember how long the Jade Helm exercise was, but I remember he was gone for a while.
I do have written down that it was, quote, stupid.
Yes, he said it was very stupid. It was, if I remember right, it was like a training in guerrilla warfare. And he goes, we work in Niger. This isn't like a readiness training for the theater we work in. So it's a complete waste of time. We're just out here in the desert driving around. And he said the exercises were poorly done, and they basically were just bored. Yeah, so they just called it stupid.
From what you learned later on from digging into it, was that considered the pre-deployment train-up, Jade Helm?
Yep, the higher-ups used it as their pre-deployment training, and that's how all their training got signed off on, was based on that training, which is a joke.
Right. It's even worse, right? So when you're in, you go, this doesn't apply, but I've got this, I got the other skills to fall back on, and, things get signed off on and pushed through as they do in the military. But a third party, like yourself, coming back and looking at it and going, well, this isn't right. And then when they try to explain it, it just sounds so much worse. Mm-hmm. Because we're just, you got to do what you're told. And that happens in the story. I'm sorry I say story. It's as I read it. It's not it's real life, but in your story, there we go. But there's no excuse for some of these things when it's written down, because you got to report and things. Oh, this is why these things happened. And then you ask questions, which you did a very good job. You hit, I'd have loved to have been in the room when you were asking some of these questions to see these people kind of look at each other and go, I don't know what we can say here. Knowing what you know now, does it was just mind boggling to you to see the level of miscommunications that happened
Oh, I thought you were going to
leading up
say
to the events?
incompetence and ass covering, but
You know, I was, I go to a certain level. That's what I said when we first came on. I flipped to my OPSEC brief and I go, well, you're a spouse and none of this applies to you, so you can say whatever the hell you want.
yeah, exactly. No, it was incompetence or ass covering or both. And I wasn't sure when I was in that brief. And my father-in-law, it was the same thing. I went in there and I thought they either think I'm stupid or they're stupid. It's one or the other. Either they are actually stupid, everyone in this room, or they're coming in assuming that I'm a complete idiot because the briefing was a joke.
It's too bad, right? And yeah, we can talk more about, but so that was the end of the line was the deployment to Africa in 17, which coincidentally was 34 years after the Battle of Mogadishu at Black Hawk Down, right? Like 34 years, a couple hours. But
Crazy.
that was his second trip. So he goes, Ranger school, then right out the door to Niger, Africa, and then comes back. Anything that stood out about that first trip that led anybody to believe that anything bad was going to happen on the second trip?
Not really. They were in a different part of Africa, and or Niger, and they were looking for like kind of a place that would be more active. They should have known. I mean, yeah, as I discovered later on, that there was a lot of activity, growing attacks on everybody. So ISIS was building up. They, especially along the Mali-Niger border. Obviously in Mali, it's a hotbed of terrorism, and they have free reign to come go as they want in Mali. And then there were a lot of attacks. I think I wrote 15 in the months prior. The military was excusing it as well. They've only attacked Nigerian military groups. They've never attacked Americans. So they went on the assumption that because they hadn't yet attacked Americans, they never would. But also funding was increasing for these militant groups. And the more attacks they carried out and the more extreme the attacks, the more funding they would get from ISIS at large. So ISIS-GS, Greater Sahara, they were looking for obviously more funding to come from ISIS. And so they had increased their attacks. And each time they would conduct an attack on a Nigerian unit that was moving through the area, they would not only attack the Nigerian unit, but they would collect all the weapons. So their weapons cache was growing, and they were becoming more lethal.
We do the same thing, right? Confidence targets. You start small and you work your way up. Do you think that was in the minds of everybody in charge, that they haven't attacked Americans in the past, they're not going to do it in the future?
I mean, they said as much, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they outright told us, like, we had no reason to believe they would attack Americans. They never had. But when you actually look into, and of course, when they briefed us, they didn't tell us about all these prior attacks. These were things that me and my father-in-law spent time researching and finding out about what had actually been happening in the greater like Sahel area, however you say it. But like in that area of Niger, like what had been happening in the prior months. And that's when we found all these attacks and just kind of went, well, why wouldn't that be in the report when they're doing the briefing on what happened? That should be in there. Like, these are the attacks. These were, like kind of the signs of what could potentially happen. This is why we took the steps we did. But instead, basically, they screwed up by not taking it seriously. So they used that as an excuse to just say, hey, they'd only attacked Nigerians, so there was no reason to expect them to ever attack Americans. But they didn't discuss the type of attacks, right?
Not to skip too far ahead, and I got a star next to this one, it wasn't an intelligence failure because there was no intelligence.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. There clearly was no intelligence. um, yeah, they came to brief us for a second time in our homes, and this was before they handed us the final report. And I remember us asking them about, what was their intelligence leading up to the ambush. And that was their response. Like, there was no intelligence failure, because we were like, clearly there was an intelligence failure. And the response of the officer running that briefing at the time said, no, there was no intelligence failure, because there was no intelligence, which obviously came off as like, you're right. We're talking, you know, these guys who are scapegoating the team and not wanting to have any responsibilities. So their only answer is a non-answer, and it's that there is no intelligence. And I just thought this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And somehow that officer said that to me and my family with a completely straight face while we sat there and laughed. We were like, okay, you're right. There's no intelligence.
For those listening at home, the officer that told her this is 6'5", 350 pounds, a very large, intimidating individual. And for the way you ask questions to him is very impressive. I commend you highly, because he is very intimidating when normal people get in front of him. So yeah, to demand answers is well within your right of what the fuck happened, right?
Well,
Because
and I think one thing I do have to say about him, because, without mentioning names, you obviously know who he is. He's wonderful. I absolutely love him. I
I've
love
never
his
heard.
wife.
Oh, I'm not saying
And
anything bad. I've never heard a bad thing said about the man. I've never heard a bad
yeah.
thing said about him.
Well, and
Some of
I
the other
think,
officers you mentioned, I have.
oh yeah, yeah. And I think that's one big thing that you run into, right? Is this conflicting thing where you realize this person is not what they're briefing and what they're saying. They're in a position where their job, their career, their future is at risk if they don't deliver the information that they've been handed. This is somebody else's responsibility. Somebody else created this report and ordered this person, who I really like, to come and deliver information they don't want to deliver. And so he's sitting there in front of me, and you could just see he felt horrible saying what he was about to say, but he had to say it because that's what he'd been ordered to do. And at that
Yeah.
point, and it was horrible watching. And I told him that. I said, I know you've had a rough day, horrible day. And I'm not, I'm going to laugh at this stuff, and I'm going to ask you some serious questions, and you're going to answer them the way you've been told you have to answer them, because if you don't, then you get yourself in more trouble. But, it's just, you have to reach that point of understanding so that you know who you have to be mad at and who you're not mad at, and who's just doing their job. Because like you said, when it comes to rank, unfortunately, I think if someone like that had been, a 4-star, it would have been great, because he could have said, hey, this is all a bunch of BS. And yes, there was an intelligence failure. But because he had a 4-star handing him this report and saying, you will do this, he knew it's my career, or it's, just hand it over, say these words, and walk away and take all the blame and all the heat, which, is what really happened, unfortunately.
Yeah, orders come down from the top, and that was evident in the mission too. The pushback, and when you will do this, well, they outrank me, so I have to do it. The colonel says we're doing it. That's when we're doing it. So you had a kind of a premonition something had happened, and with your husband being in Africa where he was, you guys did not have day-to-day contact. He would have, even if he had been in Afghanistan or other places, right? You guys were pretty well cut off from one another.
Yeah, he left the end of August. So, and I think it was a few weeks until I talked to him, maybe a week and a half before he was in country, and his phone wasn't doing great. So, I think we talked 2, maybe 3 times before the ambush, not many. So,
Wow.
yeah, and it was never a long phone call.
Was anything leaked out about attacks on Americans in the media before the official notification?
Oh yeah. So, and I talk about this in the book, how I had this bad feeling from the day he left, and I forgot to answer your question fully last time. So I kind of had this bad feeling. And then our last conversation just felt off. Not because he was saying anything off, but he was getting ready to go on another, little whatever, like not a raid, but another mission. And he just sounded like, we're getting ready. I don't have much time to talk. Just tell me what's going on. I think he wanted to hear my voice and whatever. But you could tell he felt kind of off. I don't know. I think he felt off. I know I felt off. And then he just had to go. And he called me from the office phone, which is always a bad thing when you're on deployment to call from an office phone because it ties up, the line in case anything important comes through. So he was basically just telling me when we get back, I'm going to run to Maradi and get a better phone. And so that was kind of our conversation. And then he had to go. And so that was kind of it. And again, he said to me something like, this is a stupid mission. Well, it must have been a day or two later. I have it in the book. It's gosh, after 8 years, it's like my mind isn't quite, on it. But I'm in the kitchen and it's night and I'm super nervous and I just felt it for days now. Like I keep looking out my window, looking for men in uniform coming across my front lawn. And I was avoiding talking to his mom because I just had this bad feeling and I just put the kids to bed and she calls. It's like 8 o'clock at night and she goes, hey, I just wanted to call and see if you got a notification that came across your phone. I just got one. And I said, about what? And she said, there's been an attack on some Green Berets along the Mali-Niger border. And I just knew. I was like, that's Bryan. That's Bryan's team. Bryan's dead. And she was like, oh, no, we don't know that. And I just remember thinking, like, I knew. I instantly knew. And so my next step was calling everybody I could up on base. And of course, you get read just like from a sheet, we cannot notify, da, 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 da. So then the next thing I do is I call some other spouses from the team. And one of them I happened to call and she goes, yes, I heard from my husband. She said it was bad. It went real bad. And he was just calling to let me know he was okay. And the minute she said that, I just said, okay, Bryan's dead. And at this point, I'm not calling my mother-in-law back until I get the knock at the door. And I told her that if I heard anything, I would call her back. And so within the hour, someone knocked on my door. And we learned by media first. So.
Even like from my perspective as Green Beret, right? You don't want that to, and especially like the way you talked about how the guys treated you, right? After everything had happened, like just being so, I feel the same way. Like I don't want that to happen to anybody, to have to go through that. And it's just heartbreaking that like we're doing this thing for us to be the baddest motherfuckers, right? And then you're a Harry Potter fan, are you?
Oh yeah.
In the end, right? Dumbledore, they're in the train station. He goes, "Don't pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living." And that's really how it is, right? Because we were doing, and we'll get into that later. It's like we would do what we signed up to do, and shit happened. Shit went sideways. But we're gone, and you got to pay for it. Yes. Well, you see those people in uniform and they say things. Did it have any of what they were saying register at all with you, or is just kind of lost?
I remember feeling like you don't need to tell me, I already know, but then they're ordered to read, and I don't remember what they said. No, I knew they read from a script, but essentially, as I wrote in my book, they said something to the tune of, "We're sorry, Mrs. Black." I know there's an official thing they say. I don't remember it at all. It's like someone's throwing bricks at your head, each word. And they're just, each one is, it's like stuns you to a point that you go into pretty severe shock. And then I don't remember much after that. I remember drinking probably 3 gallons of water that night and staring at the wall. I don't remember who came and went. I remember them asking me if I had anybody I could call and me just saying no, because I couldn't process or think. I finally called a friend who came over right away. But I mean, also as a spouse, the military moves you everywhere. So when your spouse is killed, you don't have family right there. So who was I going to call that I should call? You know what I mean? We were in North Carolina, and my family was all in California, and Brian's family is in Washington State. So who am I going to call that's going to show up? I mean, that I need right in that moment. It's, a friend, but that's not who you need in that moment. But yeah, you're completely in shock.
Sounds like you leaned on Brian's dad a lot.
Yeah,
Was he
he happened to
he
be
at
working
least
at
was
the,
able to sympathize the most with what was happening, right? What was that like?
yeah. That was the first thing is the kids were asleep when I found out, and I'm really glad for that. And Brian's dad, Henry, happened to be up in DC at the time. So he managed to get down to Fayetteville the next day. And so what I did is I sent the kids to school so that they could just go to school and have a last normal day, because I knew what was going to happen the minute they found out. And I couldn't do it by myself. And I felt like the kids would feel safer if they had their grandpa there, their dad's dad, and that way we were all going through it together, but also that they had him to see as an extra support, so that they could see they didn't lose all of their dad, and I don't know how much veracity that has, but that felt right. So he actually came down, and we took him out to a park that afternoon, and we told them out at this park, and he was there just when the kids were obviously really upset and asking like, well, like what happened, and who's going to teach us to do. I mean, they're asking questions that I just wouldn't think would go through a kid's mind in that moment. Like, who's going to teach us how to do everything and help raise us? And he stepped right up and said, I will. And and that's when I was like, okay, this is exactly what's needed. And because at the time, I mean, to be quite honest, Brian's whole life was military, but we didn't live on base, and I never bothered learning the military stuff. So as we're learning what's happening, now I've got Henry there, who's a former Marine officer, and I'm going, what does this mean? Like what, now I'm having to learn everything military related, all the jargon, what they're telling me, what's just a routine mission. And what do they mean by a routine mission versus this versus that? And so he's able to kind of walk me through all the basics. And then that's where we started really being able to talk, and all the questions started popping up, and he could say, this doesn't make sense because X, Y, Z. And then, but he had a lot of faith in the military, because that was his whole career. And he knew he was a very, he was he's just a very upright man. And so for him, you wouldn't do what they were doing to us. You wouldn't lie about what happened. So he really believed in the military institutions. And I think for him, that was both difficult and good for us both to be there, because I wasn't raised around the military institution. So I'm more likely to question, to be like, yeah, but why are they lying about this? And this isn't okay. And then it kind of pushed him to kind of be like, yeah, you're right. And then explain to me what was happening when I didn't understand. And so between the two of us, we started both kind of pushing outside of our beliefs and understandings and saying like, okay, something's not right here, and something's not okay about how this is being handled.
It's got to be earth shattering, right, for him, for a Marine officer who, Marines they're all about the Marines, and the officers are all about their Marines that they're in charge of. Very, very upright and proper. And then to see things that you didn't think could happen, or reports be put out and said in different ways. That's probably got to be pretty demoralizing, especially if it's your son, um, and something you had faith in. Did did you notice that in him, where he just, just because eventually you got to start saying what the fuck and start rethinking what you thought about life? Did you start seeing that in him?
Yeah, very much so. I think, the places where he could, what ended up having to happen was being able to differentiate between individuals and the military at large, right? Just like everything else in life. I think before he saw it as an overall good system. I think now he can see where, there were really bad individuals, and those bad individuals took advantage of the system. And the way the system's set up allows for those bad actors to come in and do what was done to us. And that needs to not be able to happen. Um, but yeah, like that was really hard on him for a long time. And I think he still struggles with it. I think for me, because I tend to question any big institution and how much, how principled it is, especially when any institution gets so large, and you look at it now, and it's gotten so large that, and the way it's set up with officers, like you said, 4-star all the way down. I mean, it's a chain of command. And so if you get somebody at the top who is not principled, it affects the entire chain of command all the way down to the bottom. And, a lot of people who are very principled start seeing that the higher they get, and they get out, they retire before they hit 4-star, because they get tired of the politics. Because really, once you go above a 2-star, it's a very political game. It just is. These 3 and 4-star generals, they're politicians by that point. And I've met some that are wonderful men. And they really are doing the best for their soldiers that they can, but they still have to play the political side of it. And it becomes a chess game at that level. So a lot of people just get tired of it and get out. But yeah, I think that was a huge thing that Henry kind of unfortunately was faced with, working through once everything happened to Bryan.
Yeah, it's too bad. So your casualty assistance officer is guiding you both through this process, right? And that's one thing that the military does well. So when a spouse or soldier passes away, if the family is assigned a CAO, which is a casualty assistance officer, and they guide the family or the spouse through all of the many, many things that have to happen. Um, did you find that process pretty helpful? Because you had said you've got to be kind of out of it, and just at this point, was that person just ushering you through the way to do things?
Yeah. And, I do have to say that is something that USASOC in particular, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, just excels at. They go above and beyond, making sure that their casualty assistance officers are some of the highest trained and best selected for their missions with their spouses. So with the Gold Star families they deal with. So because I've at this point, I know a lot of other Gold Star widows outside of the Green Berets that are just regular Army, and their experiences are vastly different. And I worked with a former USASOC general just a couple times, because we are always wanting to improve and make sure that our people get the best of the best. And that, if there's any issues at any point with any of the CAOs, your experience included, we want feedback and we want to improve. And so really my CAO was also an operator. They pulled him back temporarily from his next deployment, and he was with me. And he just said, I'm going to treat you the same way I would my spouse. And if this happened to her, and everything was just, it was pretty incredible. If I wanted, anything, at one point we were burying Bryan in Arlington, and I had spoken with Trump, and we were going to stay at his hotel. And I told my CAO, I said, I would like, while we're in town, to do something to distract us on Halloween, because Halloween was the day after we buried Bryan. And I'm like, I have my kids. We're obviously not going to go trick-or-treating the day after we bury their dad while we're in DC. Like, can we get a White House tour or something? Can you start calling? And he made phone calls, got a hold of the White House, and got us in there. I mean, just, completely unbelievable. So above and beyond for sure.
The story about getting to stay at Trump's hotel, your son wanting to do that, that really made me smile. And that you had the wherewithal to say, because everybody says that, and you said it in the book, right? If there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to ask. And everybody just goes, oh, yeah, thanks. Thank you for that. But good on you for immediately taking advantage of that for the benefit of your son. So that's really cool. You had mentioned Arlington, right? I've walked in Arlington. It's got its own personality when you go through there. I can't imagine going there from your perspective. What was it like? Just because for people that haven't been, it's endless rows of white stone of soldiers that have fought for and died for America, mostly in combat. Started there during the Civil War, and thousands and thousands and thousands of tombstones. And what was it like going there for the first time to bury your husband?
It was completely overwhelming. It felt like we stepped back in time, and like everything had just slowed down. Almost like we walked in and we were burying him in another place in history. It's just, yeah, it's completely overwhelming.
It's a strange place, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
I encourage everybody to go there and just walk around, just not with anybody, just to go there and just walk around and look at the tombstones and consider life and watch the changing of the guard, because it truly is a place that's indescribable to anywhere else I've been in the United States. So your husband's laid to rest and you go to the unit memorial. I felt like in the book, you went from you're in mourning, and then it kind of switched over to curiosity and into anger. What caused that process?
Oh gosh, it was a mixture of things. It was how quickly the officers are coming over, befriending us, people who normally wouldn't talk to me, right? We're not allowed to interact with. And suddenly it's, oh, they were just on a routine patrol. We don't know anything. Their wives are making friends with me. Our kids are playing together. And so I'm getting all this time with them. And I'm thinking, why am I not getting to see Bryan's team members? I want to see them. I want to make sure they're okay. I know them. By now it's been a couple years. I know their wives. When they're home, the guys have their parties. I've gotten to know these guys. They're great guys. And I'm going, why don't I get to see them? And so when I finally do, it's the unit memorial. And one of them mentions that they're not allowed to speak to us. They're not allowed to tell us what's happening. And that to me was a huge red flag, and it angered me because I thought all I've wanted is to just see them and make sure that they're okay. And for some reason, they're being ordered not to have a conversation with me, so that the entire narrative is based off of these officers. And then leaks begin to come out in the media saying that these guys are cowboys and they went rogue. And they're saying that this is coming from like within the investigation, that anonymous sources. And I'm thinking, well, if these guys aren't allowed to talk and defend themselves, but there's all these anonymous sources, and I know that the officers are allowed to talk. Are they the place these anonymous sources? Like, is that the anonymous source? Because clearly they're allowed to talk. And where is the investigation coming from with this? And that's kind of where the questions, frustration, and anger began to build, because I didn't believe for a second that the men were guilty of anything. For me, It was, where are these lies coming from? And why are the officers allowed to come and talk to me, but the people who are actually there with Bryan can't? And that's when I knew something was really off.
Yeah, that's going to be a shock to the system, right? Teammates who you've hung out and families. Oh, you're not getting any information on actually what happened. And then you're starting to realize that everything these high ranking officers are telling you is bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be upsetting, right? Just and then oh, now we got to get into the why. Why am I getting led on and lied to? Because you wrote that colonel basically lied to you right away.
Yeah, and that was the thing. The colonel who came to my house first to try and comfort us, and he did, like, hey, they were just on a routine patrol. I don't know anything. Then, his wife befriends me. His kids are playing with my kids, like not just at my house, but multiple different events, including the unit memorial and other things. Then I see this article come out that says, Colonel Moses says that, basically Colonel Moses was part of the decision-making process when they pushed the team ahead on a second mission that day and then a third mission. So it's saying that essentially this was not a routine patrol, and that the decision maker was this colonel who had showed up to my home the first day and said, I don't know anything. It was just a routine patrol. So it tells me that his first go-to thing was to come to my home, comfort me, and lie to me. And that, if he had been honest and just said, I can't share anything yet because there's an ongoing investigation, I was part of the decision-making process. We don't know where it went wrong. I'm so sorry. And as we have more, information and I can discuss it with you, I will. Please send me any questions and I'll do my best to answer. That's fine. My goal was never to see somebody punished or held accountable for this whole thing. But then everybody lied. And if you lie to me, then you must have done something really wrong. And now I've got a problem, and I do want to see you held accountable, because you should not be a leader and you should not be making decisions that cost men their lives.
Why do you think that narrative was pushed to you? Is it just because maybe they thought, oh, she's just a spouse and she'll go away? This is a problem we don't have to deal with.
Sure, I'm just, an Army spouse, an Army wife, a dependa. Like, I'm not smart enough to figure this out, and they can tell me whatever I want. Like, it's the typical attitude. It's like the first time I mentioned to one of them, I'm going to write a book, and it was the attitude of, that's cute. And they said, okay, it is cute. I
wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing.
It's so true, though.
I was laughing
that
you said dependa.
It is. Me and my friends joke about it. I'm a dependopotamus. So, it's just, it's the attitude of a lot of people in the military, not all, but you get that attitude, especially from officers, because they assume that you aren't educated if you're married to an enlisted man, which is not the case. In fact, enlisted Green Berets are some of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Like, all of them, and whether they have a degree or not, which I was raised by family members who do not even have high school diplomas, but are some of the most successful business people I've ever known. So my dad, he got his GED, started a business, and by the time he died, owned half the town. So for me, education has nothing to do with it. That doesn't mean you aren't intelligent. And the Green Berets I know and their spouses are brilliant. So for me, that attitude towards me and other spouses just blew my mind.
Yeah, I can see where it comes from, though. They think they live in a very complicated world that nobody can comprehend. And you're not going to understand what I tell you anyway, so I'm just going to give you something to appease you. I can totally see that happening. Not saying that's what did happen, but yeah. I can totally see that happening.
Yeah. And I tend to show up, and I'm nice and, fairly quiet and, blonde hair, blue eyes. So, I look pretty gullible. So it works. You get underestimated. It's a good thing.
That can be your advantage sometimes, right? You play dumb. Exactly. That's a technique of manipulating people, undervaluing or undershowing how smart you are, to manipulate them into giving you more information than they normally would. So, yeah. I mean, it's a technique.
Yeah. That's all you got, go with it.
Investigation 15-6. Investigation starts, and the families, including yourself, are supposed to get debriefed. This brief date keeps changing and getting pushed back and pushed back. Do you think that they were discovering more information? Because at one point, the possible video ended up turning into real video coming out. So they're just discovering more and more things and trying to figure out what's happened, or not trying to figure out what would happen. Why do you think it just kept getting pushed off and pushed off?
You know, I've thought about a million different reasons. And I do think that, yeah, having the video, the head cam video come out. I mean, I get them wanting to go over that. Do I think it should have taken as long as it did? No. I think, in my opinion, they were trying to figure out how they're going to get ahead of it and how they're going to pull off blaming the team as more questions and more media is surrounding it. It was a big CYA. And that's the only thing I can come up with why they would keep putting it off. It's them trying to all agree on the best way to approach covering everybody.
So the brief, is this and everything that's afforded to the families of somebody killed in the line of duty, of a debrief of what happened, the events that led up to and after the soldier being killed in action? Is this something that always happens?
From what I understand, there's a line of duty death investigation for every death in the military, right? Whether it's sickness, suicide, or killed in action. But this public level and the amount of time it took, well, from what I've heard, death investigations can take a very long time, kind of a ridiculous amount of time. So yes and no. Ours was unusual in the fact that it was pretty much played out in a very public fashion the entire time. And everyone, it felt like everyone in America was watching it unfold. So they were being much more careful, I think, just with the optics.
How are you feeling during all this? So you got to be starting to get just that more itchy feeling of what the fuck is actually going on here? Because this team's still not talking to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, no one's really talking. So it just felt like this overwhelming cloud is hanging over you. And me and Henry are talking in circles every single night, reading every article we can, trying to figure out which article is lying to us, how much article has truth in it, and what's the truth. And you've got to figure every single media outlet is coming out with articles. So you're saying who's saying the truth, who's not saying the truth. It's constant. You know what I mean? And then, of course, it's because President Trump is the, president at the time, and he was such a controversial figure. So then this is his fault. So then you've got all the bias stuff and political game that's going on that's not relevant at all. I mean, what does a president have to do with, a 12-man team, an incident, from a 12-man team in the middle of nowhere, Niger? He knew nothing about it until the media started yelling about it. So, those decisions that affect a 12-man team, those aren't ever made or cross the desk of a sitting president, period, unless it involves a, head of ISIS or something major.
And that, you kind of went into it. After your husband was killed, you got a call from President Trump, right? And you guys spoke, and you're the spouse of a Green Beret, and whatever was said between you guys, and you walked away from that feeling. Did you feel anything, or you just were?
I think it was pretty overwhelming, right? Because Bryan was there. I mean, I sat with him in our front room when President Trump was elected. Bryan doesn't vote, never did, never cared. He thought the whole thing was hilarious that people were upset and Trump gets voted in. And I remember us watching it, and it was so this is nuts. Some TV personality just won the presidency. But, that was kind of, so then going to DC that summer and seen the Trump Hotel, and like, I didn't know anything about him really, other than what was being said on the campaign. And then now he's president, but I never followed his other stuff before that. Instead of suddenly have him on the phone and talking to the kids, and the kids are excited, and he was just so human, and personable, and charismatic, which I think, a lot of people become president. They are. I'm sure Obama was the same way. And so to have him take the time to call us and talk to the kids. And when I hung up, I thought, okay, we had a moment in like this whole time period of absolute trauma, tragedy, like no day was good. Everything was horrible. And we just had this moment where for just that, like 5 minutes or whatever it was actually good. And my kids were excited and smiling. And it was like this moment where you could breathe, in the middle of all the chaos and just darkness. So, yeah, it was just a little pocket of light.
Why do you think the other phone call got blown up so much more? Is it because he said something that would have been suitable to a different spouse that he said to her? If he would have said that to you, I don't think you would have taken it that way, but just things are taken differently by different people.
Yeah, when he called me, we were talking, and he said something like, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And I said, like, he's in the military. This is the kind of thing, and I'm not saying it verbatim right now, but it was something essentially to the effect of, like, we knew this was a possibility. This is what he signed up for, but obviously it still hurts, and but this is kind of part of it. And so I know when he called the other spouse, he said something of that sentiment, like, "Hey, I know he signed up for this, and this was always a possibility, but it still hurts." And the reality is that is the reality of a military spouse. But yeah, it hurt her feelings. And I can understand that. You're in this emotional state where someone's going to say something to you, and they're putting their own lives at risk with how you'll respond. I mean, you're in a pretty fragile state. You're not rational at all. And there were a few people that said things to me that I got really upset about. In hindsight, it wasn't that big of a deal, and so I can see how she took offense to what he said, for sure. Is it the kind of thing I would have taken offense to? No, but there were other dumb things that I took, much dumber things that I took offense to. And I think a lot of times it just had to do with who delivered the message.
Yeah. The one thing that popped into my head was the date. I'm like January to October, 9 months. He's been in the seat for 9 months. And I wanted to look this up, how many of those he had done prior to calling you. And it can't be that much because not many people were killed in 2017, soldier-wise, or killed in action. And it escapes me now, but you're not prepared to make a phone call like that, no matter who you are. So I almost wanted to say he was probably just winging it and just trying to just be himself without. And you said he led the conversation because he's a talker, and he just tried to make you feel better, and I don't know, make it all better. And yeah, there's no preparing for making a phone call like that or telling somebody that somebody's died. So I tried to look at it from both sides, and it's just a shitty situation all around for everybody to get into.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to make a phone call like that. And I've been there, even being through that. I would not want to call someone's house, like into their home right after they lost a spouse. It's horrible. There's nothing you can say that's going to be okay.
No, there's nothing to say. When you have to tell somebody that someone they love has died, you just kind of find the words, and then you think about it later and go, "Oh, I can't believe I said that." But you sit down with full bird colonel, and it's time for a brief, right? After all of your investigation at the end, and you're sitting in this brief, how much of that original brief was true?
Portions. small portions. I mean, the first one, it's they're going to punish the team captain. What was it they kept telling me that there's no such thing as a oh gosh, is a okay. So they made these different con ops, and the one he did was like a civ mil, so a civilian military reconnaissance, and I'm being told there's no such thing as a civ mil. And so I go into my first brief, and I didn't think to really look into that because it seems obvious, right? It's a civ mil mission. It's civilian military. And I am told that there's no doctrinal definition for it. And so therefore that's proof that the team leader, or the team captain, misled the entire operation. I mean, I am told so many things that later I found out is just complete BS. And they're hoping that I don't have enough common sense to figure out that civ mil means civilian military, and that's brought together all the time. And of course, even if there's not a doctrinal definition, it's something that's used. And that's exactly what they did. And that them doing that and putting that in a CONOP would have no effect on the next two CONOPs, which were created by somebody else at a higher level who should have been aware that if they were doing a civilian military reconnaissance, even if there's no doctrinal definition for it, that they were not misled. And that if an officer higher up the chain looks at that's what they were doing, is the standard routine patrol they've been doing, they would not be prepared for what they were sending them into next. And that, so basically everything they tried to lie to us about and hope that we would believe. By the time we got to the second briefing, I think they had just given up. And by that point, they were in a position of defending themselves. And that's where the intelligence failure and no, Mrs. Black, there was just no intelligence came in. At that point, they had kind of just given up. The whole story was completely different. And it was just trying to defend their position of this is why we're going to punish certain people, because at that point, they didn't have a leg to stand on and they knew it.
Yeah. So why pursue it so much though, right? Is because you just had to know, because you just kept going, that's bullshit. I want to hear the truth. Or was something else in the back of your mind, like, my husband would want me to know as well too. What was all feeding into just digging deeper into it to find out the actual truth?
I think there's multiple things. One thing that really, really triggered it was at the media brief, the 4-star general of AFRICOM, General Waldhauser, 4-star general, he stated that first of all, he was stating that they were going to punish the team and they were going to go after Mike Perezzini and end his career. And by then I already knew Mike was not guilty of anything. But so basically they were promising, hey, we're going to punish all these guys and make sure, basically they never operate again. And then they said that while all teams on the continent were performing optimally, this team was not indicative of what special operators do. So what they were doing was essentially, complimenting my husband to my face. And then in front of the media and the entire country, they were dishonoring all of those who had fought and died alongside my husband, including my husband, and saying that they were not indicative of special operators. And to me, that was enough to say, okay, well, let's just pull back here and let's this is not going to stand. And I'm going to prove everything he's saying is a lie, that it's not true, that every single one of these guys is a hero and deserves more respect than that. And that you don't get to sit here and lie to my family and everybody else's family when our husbands and loved ones gave their entire lives for your country, just because you want to save an officer's career and your career and look good. Like these people, these officers made these decisions, put my husband out there when him and the entire team was saying, this is not safe. We could all die. Then they die. And you now are lying to us to save your career. And you're going to end the careers of people who did nothing wrong and did everything right. And so for me, the level of injustice there was unacceptable. And at that point, I thought, nothing in my life is going to change if I pursue this, but everything will change in the lives of the guys who came back if I don't pursue this, because they will lose their careers. And all these people they were supposed to be able to depend on turned on them. All these higher up the chain officers who told them to trust them are actually just hanging them out to dry. So there were multiple things, but I think also, just for a Gold Star family member, when you are lied to about how someone you love died, you can't rest until you know every single detail. And I mean, I don't care if I have to know all the horrific details. And I think that's what bothered me most about the lies, is they always say, oh, we're just protecting these family members. And, we don't want them to hurt more. Well, if that's the case, then why do you hand me the entire autopsy, including photos after his death? If it's about protecting me, then I would get no information. I wouldn't get entire pictures of his autopsy and yet lie about how it happened. That's not protecting me. That's protecting yourself. So, yeah, it was all of that. By that point, I was irate. I was tired of the injustice, and I wasn't going to let more people be punished for what happened.
That sounds shitty, but did it help you get over the kind of the sadness to get into the anger and to?
Yeah, I mean, digging deep into the anger was fantastic. It pushed off the grieving for a while. So until the book came out and I felt like I had kind of exercised and worked that out as fully as I could, I was able to push off that whole grieving process. And I mean, of course, later on, you kind of have to face it and go through it. But having that distance also helped once I finally faced it and went through it. But feeling like I made a difference in the lives of his team, like, being able to get those punishments rescinded, getting the actual truth out there. I mean, even if only one person read my book, I was fine with that. For me, it was just saying, okay, this is the truth. It's now out there for all of eternity. And everybody knows that you're a liar and you're a liar, and that you lied to military families who deserve better, and hopefully that would help.
Yeah. And you got to share, once you're able to talk to the team again, you got to share in the anger/grieving process by interviewing all the team members, the ones that would sit down with you. I imagine most of them did. A couple probably. I think you had said a couple probably held off from that. And everyone's got their own reasons. The military is a shaky place with talking to anyone and telling an official story. What was it like sitting down with the members of your team, of the team, the ODA that were there when your husband died?
I think it was overwhelming on both sides, because at that time they feel so guilty, but also there's that grief that they're not allowed to have. The military doesn't allow these guys to have grief, right? They're supposed to come home and apologize to us and then take any blame or fault. And then on top of it, there's this survivor's guilt. And so for them, I think there was that really overwhelming feeling. But for me, it was this overwhelming feeling of me wanting them to know that I didn't want them to feel that way. Like, I felt nothing negative towards them, and that I understood Bryan made a choice to give his life so that they could come home, and that's what he wanted. And so I was glad they were there, that they had made it home, since he had died with that in mind. And that the more of them that didn't make it home, the more upset I would have been. Like, if Bryan's life could have brought all of them home instead of, him dying as well as 3 others, like, I would have rather him been the only one who died and he got all of them home. And I know he would have felt the same way. So when they would come to me and try to apologize, it was like, you don't get to apologize, because if you'd had the opportunity, you would have taken a bullet for him first, but he didn't let you do that. So, that's not something you can apologize for or get to.
Yeah, I like to think, as a Green Beret or whatever, that the decisions that I would make are the same decisions that every one of us would make on the enlisted side, at least, right? We would all make the same decisions for each other. And I don't think your husband or any guy on that team would be any different. Um, you know, it's, at least that's the group that I hope I grew up in. But when I hear shit like this about like officers protecting their career or predetermining that the captain's going to take the fall for this, because it sounded like the way you wrote it, it was decided ahead of time what was going to happen, that this was the captain's fault. And legally, in the chain of command wise, yes, the commander is responsible for everything the team does or fails to do while he's in command of that team. But there are factors that came into place, and it just, when you laid them out, they just pissed me off so much that it's like, yes, you're in control, but you're ordered to do something against the orders of the team, and it got people killed. That's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
I just feel so bad, like, that you had to discover that. Not that they didn't tell you that, they didn't lay that out for you and give you that information. You had to go discover that on your own, and it's got to be fucking heartbreaking, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's, yeah.
Yeah, that sucks. And it's even like a shock for me. It must have been for your father-in-law to, but I kind of know that shit is there, from my understanding of group and things like that. And that's kind of the way it is. But you shouldn't have to present that information to a family member and fucking lie to them. It's bullshit.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. Let's get into, like, they're giving them the mission, right? And they briefed that mission. They were going to go out on it, and they ended up accomplishing what they briefed, right? They were told to go do something else.
Yeah.
Now they're being told, go do this. And amongst much protests, as from their side of the story, they protested actually doing that, and they were told to go do it. That's something in the Army you have to do. You're told to do something. You can put up as much stink as you want, but you're going to go do it. What level of pushback did you uncover that they had put up to this, and the reasons behind it?
Yeah. So basically, so kind of walk through the area that they were trying to be pushed ahead to. So it makes sense why they would push back. So they were being told, they were on their way home. They'd finished their civ mil recon, and they were told to pull over. So they did. And they said, hey, listen, we've got a piece of SIGINT. And here's what's a problem is they keep being told, and this is where the captain had a problem. Over and over, we're using the same source of single source SIGINT intel, right? And so he's like, we're kind of creating this rut of continually using this single source SIGINT, which is not good. And for those of you who don't know, that's essentially using like a cell phone ping from the same cell phone over and over. And so they keep hearing, hey, we're going to get SIGINT. We're getting SIGINT, and it's from the same source, and it's up here now. So they're saying, hey, we think the terrorist is up in this area now, and him and all of his people. So we want you to go up there. And when they realize where it's at, he's like, hey, this is on the Mali-Niger border. Now, the Mali-Niger border, terrorists can go in and out. Americans cannot cross over into Mali. And so it's kind of a hotbed of terrorism up there, and it's kind of the Wild West of Niger. Once you go past the town they've been in, north of it, this area called Tiloa. Once you go north of that, it's a free fire zone, which means no one's ever out there. There's a handful of farmers, like, a couple huts. They know not to go out at night because the whole area is filled with terrorists on motorcycles, and the Nigerian army is free to fire on anyone they see out there at night. And so it's just so many terrorists, and they believe that the cell phone is now pinged at an enemy campsite, and they want the team to go up there and exploit the campsite. but it's going to be easily a 12-hour drive through the dark, through the Wild West, through this big terrorist hotbed. And they're in, I believe, an 8-vehicle convoy. And I mean, if you've ever been out in the desert at night, there's no way to move across the desert without being heard. Even, I mean, in an empty desert, one car is going to be heard, but 8 vehicles is going to be impossible to not see. And also these trucks drive maybe 5 miles an hour. There are no roads. And the people they're trying to catch are on motorcycles. Motorcycles are going to go 25 miles an hour. So they've got to make this huge movement through night in trucks to try and exploit this campsite and try and surprise these terrorists and potentially engage them when they get there. And that doesn't make any sense, because if they try and capture them or anything, these guys are going to cross over the border into Mali and get away. And so what the guys are being asked to do is impossible. And the team captain says, there is no way. We can't do this as a team. So he argues back and forth and basically is told that you aren't the type of team who gets to choose your missions. You will do what you are told and you will go, or you will lose your career. And so Mike, team captain, Mike Perzini, says, well, let me think for a minute. Let me discuss it with my team and I'll get back to you, because this really isn't an operation that we're capable of, especially by ourselves. So they get off the phone. Mike calls his friend, who is the captain of a heliborne unit, and they have an EFON, which is like a Special Forces Nigerian unit attached to them. And he says, hey, what do you think? You guys can fly in. Also, that'll allow us to have medevac in case we have any sort of issues. You can help us, if there's an injury, whatever, or CASEVAC, casualty evacuation, because they had no air support either. So this would be built-in air support, which is great. But the team could then come in and be like the backup team, Bryan's team. So the heliborne unit would come in. They'd be the team lead. They would land on one side, and then Bryan's team would come up, kind of be the backup team. And that way it would prevent the terrorists from escaping over the Mali border, and it would be a much more successful mission. And then they would also have, aerial support. So that all makes sense. It's decided. And that's when Mike finally says, okay, we're not going to push back anymore. We can do it as long as we've got the heliborne unit involved. And so calls higher ups say, yes, absolutely. That makes sense. They start their BTCs and planning for it. And Mike's basically ordered to go ahead, start making the drive up there. And then, get to the coordinates we get to. And then in a little bit, we will, reach out to us when you get there. And then we'll make a plan for the heliborne unit to meet you in the morning up at the site, whatever, conduct the mission. And so Bryan's team drives, hours up there. I think it was 10 to 12 hours. And when they get there, it's the middle of the night, and the heliborne unit gets turned around due to a weather storm. And so then Mike calls back, says, we request to return to base because we cannot finish this mission alone. It doesn't make sense, and I'm not comfortable. Basically, it's putting us all in danger. Everyone agrees except the decision-making commander. And he says, no, I'm sorry. Basically, you're going whether you like it or not, and orders them ahead, and then basically reads them the rules of engagement and orders them to go.
What are your thoughts towards that person?
It's weird, because I know from the book he comes across as, I think people tend to just hate the guy. But I think hindsight now, obviously frustration. I'm frustrated at the stupidity of that level of decision making being that poor. And I wonder what was running through his mind if he's not listening to the ground commander and the people back at base who are telling him the same thing, that Mike is correct, the team captain's correct, and this is a really bad decision, especially for that area, because the commander making the decision and forcing them ahead is in Chad. So obviously he doesn't have eyes on, and he really doesn't know what's going on. So, I mean, it's imperative that you listen to the ground commander, right? And if everybody in country is saying, hey, this is a bad decision, then you might want to listen to everybody who's actually in the country. So in that aspect, super frustrated. And I've still never gotten answers from him. But I also see him in the aftermath and everything that's happened, and I've heard has happened in his life. And I feel bad for the guy, because, I mean, it was probably the worst decision of his career, and it's affected his entire life. And he's never gotten to apologize. I mean, he had the opportunity to apologize. He didn't take it, but.
Well, he'll probably have to live with that for the rest of his life. I listened to it or read it, listened to it, and then I was like, okay, who's he getting advised by? So this is a lieutenant colonel, 20 some years, 10, 15 years in SF, right? Getting, sir, this is what we're going to do, from two captains that just got out of the Q course. So the team commander is a captain who just got to the team, right? And the AOB commander is on maternity leave, and his XO just got out of the Q course. So he's got two brand new Green Beret captains, and he probably said, no, you guys are making the wrong tactical decision. I know what I'm talking about. Do it anyway. And that was probably it. That was probably all the thought he put into it there. Is, no, these guys are hesitant because they're brand new to the regiment. Just do it. That's a wrong decision. I just think of it like that. That's how I thought of it right away. But still, bullshit, right? Led to, obviously, you don't know what's going to happen after you make that decision. And nobody, I guess nobody expected this to happen, right? You don't expect them to break from tradition, so to speak, and things to go sideways. And it sucks when they do.
I think another thing is, you've got someone like him, the lieutenant colonel, who's coming from a place like Afghanistan. He's been working in Afghanistan for years. They've just switched, over to Niger, over to Africa. And you look at the setup they're used to working under. It doesn't occur to them right off the bat that if anything goes wrong, like, there is no access to the team. Like, they are on their own completely. In Africa, something goes wrong. You've got so much air support. You've got, a million places to pull help from. In Africa, I mean, you're sharing, your support, your drone with the entire continent. It's let alone like Kazovac or even just fast movers to come in. They're having to ask the French to come in and help. So anything goes wrong and no one can actually get to or help the guys on the ground. So when you make a decision, you have to make it entirely different than you did just a few months ago on your last deployment in Afghanistan. And if you've been commanding, operations on the ground in Afghanistan, you can be a bulldog. You can, be more aggressive and just make calls that quickly without really considering if something goes wrong, what does that look like? You don't have to worry about it because if something goes wrong, instantly we fly in, we, pick them up. We've got a million people there on call helping, where Africa, nobody's there. And so I wonder if also that was part of it. Is he just, yeah.
Here's the wrong tactics for the different tactical situation. That's a great point. Because you get into a tick, troops in contact in Afghanistan, the full might of the United States of America is coming to help you out immediately. Where I don't know if anybody's listening's ever been to Africa. It fucking sucks, and it's really far to anywhere. And it's nothing like any of the cities here in the United States. There's facilities everywhere. There's in Niger, there's nowhere. There's no roads in the whole country. It's all just dirt, everything once you get outside the capital. So yeah, that's a great point. You went into fantastic detail of the battle. How long did it take you to draw that out and lay it out? Did you have sheets of paper cut out and little names on like a table and sand, like a sand table? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I do, but no, that's not what I did. I had each interview, and then I went through and I you know took the recordings and then just wrote everything down on paper, and then I just pieced them together and then tried to blend through the stories the way they told them. And then I would do a timeline and put it up there and see if it fit. And so adjust the timelines. I mean, it took months. And then once I got all of that, I mean, once I had everything the way that looked correct, then I ran it by the guys and said, does this look correct, the order? And it was very dry at that point. So then they all go through and go, yeah, that looks correct. So created my timeline with all the details. And then after that was when I started doing more research, like what does this acronym mean? What does that acronym mean? What does it smell like, sound like, whatever, look like in Niger? And adding in texture and layers. What's the conversation they're having? What is this weapon that they're talking about? I've never even shot a gun. So now I'm looking things up on the internet, these different Russian era guns, and I'm running those through. I mean, even things as far as, it sounds simple, but when the machine guns jam. And so then I'm looking up that, like, what does that look like when that happens? And how does that sound and whatever, and going into detail on that. So hours of time on YouTube looking at weapons and what they sounded like. And so it was, that was probably the hardest thing for me to write, because, I mean, you're going from someone who knows nothing about the military really, or combat, and never shot a weapon. And now I've never been to Africa, but I did grow up near the Mojave Desert. So I knew a lot about the desert and just how deserts are. So that was a little easier for me. And then, just trying to go into the details that way.
What's your emotions like at this point? Because it's, you're having to be pretty matter of fact about things and laying out the sequence of events. And they are, even, it's emotional reading it.
Yeah. It was hard. I think the hardest part, because by then it was like I was able to look at it as Bryan and all the guys, they died pretty quickly. So for me, the hardest thing to write was all the pieces where when the guys had told me about them, I could see in their eyes, like, what they dealt with, like being hunted down like an animal through the forest. Like that for me was probably the hardest part, and having to listen to their recordings over and over, especially since some of them were so young, right? And I'm raising two boys and they're pretty young and they want to go in the military. And I'm hearing these guys who were like 20, 21 just break. And they're going, like, I think one of them said something like, America never showed up to the fight. It was just me, my brothers on the ground, and the French sent in some fast movers. But basically, we were deserted by America. And there were just things like that that absolutely broke my heart over the whole situation. Or, that last scene where one of the last scenes where the guys are on the ground and they're the young guys again, because everybody else is out of the fight at this point. And there's just three of them and they're all in their 20s. They're all brand new to the team. And basically they're the ones who are responsible for keeping everybody alive. And that's when the terrorists walk up on them. And they know the minute we open fire, we're all dead. Whatever decision we make will determine whether our friends live or die. And just like those were the really hard parts, because I could still see and feel and hear that, from them, what they went through, as I'm writing those pieces, and knowing that they made it out, but knowing how close it was.
How close was it to an entire overrun? Because you wrote the term broken arrow at one point, where I even went, that's not what that means.
Yeah.
But
They still laugh about that. They're
you
like, you
know,
said the wrong thing, but it meant the right thing.
yeah. Which in the book, one of the soldiers says broken arrow, and what he meant was we're completely overrun. Vietnam era would have been like a FPL would have been a final protective line, right? We are past the point of no return. We're going to die, basically.
Yeah.
How close was it to a total loss for the team and their support group?
Seconds.
Yeah.
It was seconds. The French jets flew over right as they came face to face with guns pointed on them to the terrorists.
You know, if I just think about it, like, yeah, we're all, and as you said, you know, they knew what they were getting themselves into, and that sucks. It's exciting in the time until it's not, and then, because I think you had written that one guy's up until a certain point they thought it was just going to be a great story they were going to tell for the rest of their lives, and then all of a sudden it turned into, oh, we're fucked, and that's what I was going to say. It just kept building, right? So, and later, there was no investigation done onto the opposing forces' side on how it got to that level, right? So, this wasn't a couple people behind a bush taking pot shots at an ODA. This was a coordinated effort that kept getting bigger and bigger that seemed to just come up out of the desert. The desert's this a vast place, right? And we don't say desert, and more like bushy desert, not like flat sand, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of enemy combatants on the field that day. How was that missed at all levels?
I think that it's a political game, right? Everything in a situation like that's a political game, and saving face by the military, because initially reports, oh, there's 80 guys, there's, maybe 70, and they're trying to be conservative. And I'm thinking that doesn't make sense, because when I interview these guys, they're saying hundreds, 150, 200. And we're talking about a 12-man team. I think they actually only had 11 guys out that day. And not all of them were team guys. Three of them weren't actually Green Beret members. Two were support, and one was there just doing some data collecting. And so, yeah, they were overwhelmed for sure. And, we say ambush, but it wasn't actually an ambush. It was more like they were trying to ambush the team. And thank God, like, the team left as early as they did, even though we say that the village chief was delaying them. He was trying to delay them. And fortunately, the captain caught on and just said, no, we're out of here. And as they left, that's when the ambush was being set up. So it started out as a few people, but by then enemy combatants were pouring in. And so once the firefight started, it just grew and grew and grew because people were pouring into the area. So it started out as maybe a handful of people, 10 to 20, grew until there were nearly 200 combatants by the team guys' estimations of what they saw. So, and yeah.
Yeah, anyway, you look at an overwhelming force for 11 people, right? And we've got, what do we say it was? Seven Green Berets there, and then 3 support, or 8 Green Berets and 3 support.
8 Green Berets and 3 support.
Only 2 uniformed, and one was a civilian contractor.
Yeah. And I don't even know that he had a weapon on him. I think they gave him a weapon once everything started, but he was there just to take some information and work on maps. He wasn't really yeah.
Yeah, so that draws like another expectation of threat level, right? If you're taking an unarmed civilian with you, you're not expecting a coordinated attack like that. An ODA, when they go out and to get into that type of conflict, they go out with the team ready to go and combat like MOS personnel, like a JTAC or a combat controller or something like that, maybe from the Air Force or attached to them. They don't take their mechanic out with them. That's just unfortunate situation that he found himself into. And it sounds like from what you wrote, rose to the occasion before succumbing to his injuries. That's, I mean, that
David
sucks. But
he was a phenomenal soldier. In fact, he was working on becoming a Green Beret, and the guys requested he go back out with him that year. He'd been with him the year before, and they all were like, he's just a phenomenal soldier. He'd make a great Green Beret. And so they'd all been talking him into it. And he was, I believe, had worked on, he'd raised his ASVAB score and was going to go out to SFAS soon. And so he was definitely skilled.
yeah, teams will take you under their wing and they don't want to use anybody else if you do a good job. Once you got the final account of the battle from the start to, and we're not talking an incredible length here, right? Pretty much it was as long as it took to read it is the time of the actual fighting, right? So not that long. Once you put everything together and you had it laid out and you had, you're drawing conclusions about everything. What did you think about, your husband's final moments?
I think, I looked at it and I thought to myself, this is exactly how he would have wanted to die. And I'm glad that, I've always thought that people get a certain amount of time on earth. And I thought if this was the only amount of time that he got, I'm glad that he got to go out this way, because this is what he would have chosen. So if 35 years is all he got, I'm glad it wasn't a car crash, But I also thought, what a shame that the military chose to take this route and lie, because honestly, like, what a hero. And same with, Dustin and Jeremiah and LaDavid. Like, these guys were so heroic. And when you see the full headcam video, even though I was so upset about the small portion that was released, at this point, it's like, why not release the whole thing? Because you see the true heroism that happened. And you see, obviously, like you said, that the awards were not what they should have been. And they never will be, because it's political and they're never going to release the full headcam video, because then they'll be required to do something about it. But for me, it was that relief of knowing this is exactly who I know my husband to be. And what I believed he had done when he first died, I thought to myself, he did something to save someone else. I don't know who, I don't know what happened, but the reason he's dead is because he did something to save someone else. And so when I heard all these lies, it didn't line up with who he was. And so once I knew all the details, I went, oh, well, there it is. That's exactly what I knew of him. And I'm so glad. And it was a relief. And it was the first time I felt some peace about his death since he died.
I think you would describe, they formed a blocking maneuver from the rear, right? To prevent them from being overrun.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 people in the truck total against an overwhelming force. That's a hard decision to make.
Yeah.
So the final report comes out, right? After everything's said and done, way on down the line, everybody's allowed to talk again and more information's coming out. How did you feel when you heard the phrase, no fault found above the company level?
Oh, it was laughable, not unexpected, but, well, I wouldn't say that at the moment I felt laughable. It's laughable now, but it's just another insult, and I was pretty enraged about it. It's a joke, they're obviously protecting themselves, and they've managed to because, the way the military works. I mean, if somebody at their level approves that that's the truth, then that's the truth.
Well, investigations are going to find, we said earlier, right? There's careers at stake, and somebody's head's going to roll. And from the onset, the captain was to blame. And that's kind of the narrative that pushed through. And it didn't seem like anybody was going to go back and correct anything they said, either to you or to the media in the first place, that late on down the line. They were just going to ignore previous statements or things and just, this is just how it is here. This is our narrative, and we've got this. That's it. That's all, folks. How did that make you feel?
Super frustrated, really helpless. And I think, there was part with my book of that allowed me to take the power back. And I realized that as far as I could push this book, then I could control the truth. And if I could control the truth, then that was taking that back so that, I already said this, but taking that power back away from them, because I think that that's a huge part of why the military's been able to get away with doing these things for so long. I mean, you look at so many situations, whether it's Benghazi or it's Pat Tillman. And there's countless examples. Those are just the ones you hear about, your situation. The reason why they think they can get away with this, especially when someone is dead, is because who's going to go up against them? Anybody who wants to keep their job is not going to, that's for sure. And so a lot of times the only people who can actually go up against them is a family member. And I didn't realize that until all of this happened. And I realized, what are they going to do at this point? Like, if they sue the widow, then they just make her look like they bring attention to her, and then they make it look, or they stop my pay or something, they make it look like something is amiss, and they bring more attention to it and to me and what I'm saying. So I realized, like, I'm the only one who can actually speak up and defend these guys and point out the truth. And at this point, there's nothing more they can do to me. I mean, they already killed my husband, lied to me, and played a video of his death. So, like, take my money away. Okay. Like, whatever. So,
I think you said that 3 times. What are they going to do? Kill my husband? Or,
yeah.
And lie to me about it? Again, way to laugh through it. That's what I was excited to have you on, because there's things, I will say stuff up to a point, and I hope your husband would enjoy what you've done here to bring light to us, because if you hold people accountable and you bring it to light, it's less likely. It will happen again, but it's less likely the same people who at least learned from the history before will let this happen again. Just you have to burn it down and bring it all into the light and say, no, this is what happened. I have no reason to lie. This is wrong, and somebody should be accountable. Will anybody be held accountable? Maybe the wrong people will, and they'll suffer for it. But everyone's going to have this regret about this situation for the rest of their lives. And at least they're a lot, they get to go on with their lives. People died. People didn't get to go home, didn't get to go to their families, didn't get to see their loved ones grow up. And it's unfortunate, but that's a dumb question. I was going to ask, like, you never thought you'd be in this situation, having to learn all of this military jargon and this information to put this together for people to understand, and then to write it in a way that's digestible. Because anybody can pick up the book and read it. And I thought you did a fantastic job, especially from you just laid out what stuff meant, which if you listen to lesser known operators, folks listening at home, I do a terrible job of laying out what things mean on this show. So, I really commend you for that. What do you think your husband would think about all this, of you doing all this?
I think he would laugh. He always used to tell me that I didn't believe in myself enough, that I was as capable as I was. I was just always busy putting everything into the kids and whatever. And I'd always start writing stories. And he told me, oh, I should become an author. I should write. And I just always was like, I'd love to do that. But, I'm not, like that, whatever. And he's like, you just need to do it. And so he always completely had faith in me and believed I could do amazing things. And I don't know. I just never really, I don't think anything would have ever pushed me to it. But, the specific situation. It's like I have to get worked up enough to actually, be like, okay, I'm going to focus on this for because normally I'll start something and I get so distracted that it's like, oh, squirrel. But with this, it mattered so much that I couldn't look away from it until I'd completely worked it out and figured it out. And that's the thing is I have a hard time focusing, but once something really grabs me and I'm focused, I'm like, I can't, it's kind of like that whole thing, a dog with a bone. It's like, I just can't let it go until I've got it completely figured out. And so I know Bryan would be very proud of me because I know it's something that he always believed I was capable of doing is writing something amazing and doing more than just, doing the stay-at-home wife thing. And I think he saw it through my tenacity with, my son Ezekiel and all the struggle we had with him and having to figure out all the laws with the autism and getting him all the stuff he needed. But that was always my sole focus. And so that switched once Bryan died and I realized I could put together something that was pretty cool. Yeah. And just on a side note too, what we were just talking about, writing the book and all of that, I think a big thing about doing it too, in the aftermath of everything, I thought all it takes is one family member doing something like this to make the next set of officers question whether or not they should lie to a family, because now they know that someone might actually call them out publicly. And nobody wants to be in a book, for the wrong reasons. So.
Yeah, because once it's in a book, it's up on the shelf. That's there. There's, it's printed and that information's out there.
Library of Congress forever.
Forever on the internet. Did you get any pushback from any parties involved in the whole thing after you published everything?
Not really. I think I would have gotten more pushback if the book would have gone like boom, but it didn't. It just kind of, I don't know if people really noticed it. That's why we tried changing the cover. A lot of people look at it on the cover I have here and they see the folded flag and they think, oh, it's another story about a widow and losing her husband and how she got through it. It's like nobody really realized it was about the Niger ambush. And so that's why I ended up second time around choosing the paperback. But by then, changing the cover on the paperback. But by then the documentary had come out and people would just watch the documentary rather than choosing to read the book. So, you know what I mean? Kind of that whole thing. So, but I wouldn't say that I really received any pushback on the book. So.
In regards to the guys on the team, the guys that were there that survived, right? I would imagine trying to line my mind up with theirs that they hold incredible guilt for surviving and making it back, or them making it back and their teammates not. What would you say to them on that when they think that? What is your thoughts on that? What would you say to them to get them off of that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I hope they don't. I know I've talked to them about it a lot. We still talk all the time and see each other fairly often. And I always just say that I hope they live their life worthy of, you know what I mean? Like Bryan's sacrifice. Like, I hope they really live it up because it's kind of like what I explained before. I've said that to them a lot, that they would have done the same for him. They just didn't get the opportunity to do it before he did. And that's really basically what it is, because I know every single one of them would have chosen to give their lives for him. And they know that's true. And the last thing I want is for them to feel guilty about surviving. Cause, I mean, should I feel guilty about still being alive? There's definitely things that I get upset about, like the things that I feel are unfair. Like I get to watch the kids grow up and have this whole lifetime with my kids, and he doesn't. And they don't get to have a whole lifetime with him. And for me, it's those two losses, what they lost, the boys, and what Bryan lost, that upset me. And I think for me, that's what I share with these guys. Like, I want you to not feel guilty because that was a choice he made. I want you to instead take advantage of getting to watch your kids grow up and take advantage of all of those things and really build those relationships and not waste them. Because I do believe people have a set amount of time in life, and you can't control that. He was meant to die, whether it was in a car crash or Africa. I'm just glad he got to do it on his terms. And I don't want anyone to feel guilty about that, because there's no reason to,
Yeah. Live a life worthy of their sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
And while you're talking, that just made me think of, you wrote in there, the national anthem and Memorial Day just mean different things now. What do they mean now to you after this has all happened?
Yeah. I remember when I first heard it play, I was at one of the boys' wrestling matches, I believe, after Bryan died. And I just remember hearing all the words about the flag and people dying and the flag still standing tall. And I thought about Bryan and the kids, and I remember shaking. And I've gotten now to where I can stand through it, and I feel proud again, but there's still that reality that, what bought that flag in this country, it really is the death of millions of Americans. But it's more than that. It's all of these kids growing up without parents, all of these spouses having to raise their kids alone, and parents who don't have kids now. And just it's a whole lot more than just this soldier died or that soldier died. It's entire families who have sacrificed so that this country can be as great as it is. So,
Yeah, tough to put into words. That's why it's like the whole other side of things. It's not just us, the soldier. It's everything that goes along with it, and then it ends. And how is the Army's got its policies, right, for everything. How's the regiment been? Do you still get invited to the memorials and thing at group, or do you have in contact with them still?
Yeah, I mean, I stay in contact with their group, but now I live in Washington State, so going back to North Carolina, I mean, that's a flight, and it's expensive for me and the kids to go back to Memorial Day events, and so it's just not something we do anymore. We get the invitations, but it's not like reality for us. Yeah. So,
yeah. And you guys are just up the road from First Group too.
Yeah, I've tried to get invited to their stuff. They remember sometimes. But Bryan wasn't part of their group, and he was never stationed here, so it's hit or miss. I think they've invited me the last 2 years to their winter ball, so I went once, and we'll see.
Ball, yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, it's good that they reach out at least.
Yeah. And, it's at this point, it's been so long that I think those first few years really matter. You know what I mean? Because it's weird to go from being part of that to you feel like you just get, in a sense, kicked out, like you're just not part of it anymore. So it's important to be invited and go back up on base. And a lot of people don't know this, but like when your spouse dies, and we never lived on base, but if you're living on base, I think you have like 6 months to a year to get off base. You're not allowed to live there anymore, which makes sense. But still, it's like, if you've spent your whole life there, I thought about this, like people who got married, say they're 20 years old and they lose their spouse at 35 and they've always lived on base. Like it's a whole different, some of these gals I've met, they lose everything. And it's a pretty tough transition. But yeah, so when Bryan died, of course, I loved being invited to all those things initially, and I think it's important. But anymore, it's, I love that they send me the invitations, but it's not something I need anymore, which is nice.
That's all right. Where could where can everybody find you on the socials?
Um, Usually Michelle Black 71 on pretty much everywhere. So whether it's TikTok or Instagram, I'm on Twitter or X, I guess, but I don't really use it that much. Mainly just flip through it, but I don't ever post. Um, and then, Facebook. But
Well, I usually ask everybody 5 questions at the end here, and I'll read them to you, but I don't think some of them apply, but we're going to keep true to form here.
okay.
So usually I'll say, so what is your response to thank you for your service? Is there something that people say to you? I guess everybody says, I'm sorry for your loss. Or do they treat you like
They
a
say
little
thank you
kid?
for your sacrifice, which I think is awkward.
Yeah.
I'm like,
What goes
yes,
through your mind? Because that started happening right away, right? What was your thoughts on that?
I just, I mean, people mean well, so I just say thank you, but, or yeah, what do you say? Like, you're welcome. But, yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, I know that at least they're acknowledging it. So that's thoughtful. So I try to be positive.
Yeah. The younger guys that come on here that have just gotten out, that like, I ask them that, what's your response to thank you for your service? And they go, I don't know. Was that kind of the first time you heard that? You go, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, yeah. Initially, you don't know what to say. You're just kind of like, okay, because it's especially when they're thanking you for your sacrifice, and it's your husband's dead, and you're thinking like, trust me, I would have not done it on purpose. Like, you're not really welcome for that, but you know, um,
You didn't exactly sign up for that one. That one wasn't, you weren't thinking that when you signed up.
yeah.
All right, applying this one to your husband. What is the one characteristic about your husband that made him a Green Beret?
I mean, probably, it's that thing that we discussed in the beginning where it just nothing phased him. If it ran through his mind and he thought it needed to be said, it was out and everybody heard it. So it didn't matter your rank. It came out. First day he walked into his team room, he looked around and all the guys were like, hey, what do you think? And he says, it's a mess in here. You guys need to clean this place up. And that was his introduction to the team. He's like, you need to get organized. This is a mess.
So he was a pretty organized guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not. So I drove him crazy.
Oh, well, opposites attract. That's okay. The next question is usually, what is the the one moment of your career that you wish you could go back and relive or redo? From your point of view or perspective, I would say that we've probably answered that over the last 2.5 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, yeah. Well, here's something that I never talk about. I put a video out on it recently, and this is what I would redo. When I was writing my book, when I very first started it, ABC News sent out um, a producer, and they were just going to do a little 40-minute night segment, right? And so we did our interview, and he was doing it on all the families for Niger. And I didn't know at the time, but the guy was a pretty terrible human being. And so he starts talking about one of the guys on the team, and it's when everybody still believed that, Mike Perzini was at fault. So he started talking about, what a horrible person he was, blah, 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 blah. And I said, he's a great guy. And I said, that's why I'm writing a book, because there was a cover up and I plan on proving it. And so I'm interviewing all the guys on the team, and you are wrong and everybody's wrong. There's been a cover up, and I plan, whatever. So he came back 6 months later and said, I found out there's a cover up, and I believe I'm going to do a investigative piece on it and do a documentary proving that there was a cover up. And so I'll be producing a documentary for ABC News. And that's where the documentary started. And from then on out, I had to have an outright battle as he tried to steal everything from me. And that's something I never talk about. So, including the interviews with the guys. And the entire time he was telling me that I was a horribly selfish person and that I was a horrible writer. And if I ever wanted to get a book published, I would have to work with him and give him all my interviews because I could not do it without him, and that he didn't need me. He didn't need me, but I really needed him. And this went on for like months of like him just being absolutely horrible to me. And then I finally was like, I was trying to be diplomatic because I thought, well, I want all the families to be able to tell their story. And I think this is a great way for them to be able to do it. So I did interviews with him and just tried to balance. And then in the end, he was so horrible. I finally just told him, like, you need to leave me alone and just stop. And I believe I can get a publisher and I don't need you. You need me and you need these interviews, and these guys are not going to interview with you, and I'm done. And so after that, he cut me from the documentary and made Bryan look like a single soldier. And then he cut all the footage of the headcam footage except Bryan being killed. And we didn't know that. And when the documentary came out, I was in the front room watching it with Bryan's family, and they had allowed him into their home and wanted to be a part. And so then they realized he'd cut me from the documentary and then used Bryan's body in the footage of Bryan's body, but nobody else's. And Bryan's dad asked the ABC News producer, James Meek, why he had used Bryan's body like a prop. And he said, because we wanted to make the other men look more heroic. And that was kind of the last time we spoke. So if I could go back and change one thing, I would have never told him that there was a cover up because he stole that from me. And well, again, like I said, I'm glad that the other families got to have their voices. What he did to me personally was so horrific that looking back, I realized how like awful he was as a human being. And yeah, I would have rather him not have been able to move forward with that.
Well, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say about that. That's terrible. I'm sorry you went through that.
That's okay. But there is karma. He is now in prison for child porn charges. So.
Oh, well, too bad for the kids. But
so yeah, I know.
I guess it worked out.
I'm like negative positive. At least if he was doing that, he got caught. So that's good. And now he's got 6 years in prison, but
he has to register. Again, if you're listening at home, fuck that guy. What's the best piece of advice that you received during your career or your service? What piece of advice would you give out after going through all of this and everything that you uncovered and put together? And what is your words of wisdom for the day?
Well, between that last story and then just the story in general, I'd say trust your gut and don't, if your gut's telling you not to trust somebody, absolutely do not. You know?
Yeah, that's, I guess one thing you discovered through this, right, is not everybody was your friend and on your side like you thought they would be. Well, that's too bad. Well, that's a shame. Last one. What were you afraid of then, as in during your service, and what are you afraid of now? So I guess just from the spouse's perspective.
I think I was afraid as a spouse of this exact situation of Bryan dying and me being left alone to raise the kids. You know, and public attention whatsoever. I was always like deathly shy. And now I'm not at all. I really don't care. A little bit more like Bryan. And yeah, definitely not afraid of anything that I can think of. Still afraid of drowning. That sounds horrible. That's about it. I don't want to run out of air. I like it.
I sympathize with you there more than you know. All right. Obviously, we did this whole interview about you and your perspective on things. If Bryan were here, what would he want to tell us all?
I think he'd say, life's short, live it hard and fast.
I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me. I told you when we spoke on the phone, I wanted to at least give you a good experience coming on somebody's show. And at least I share a similar background with your husband, and hopefully you had a good time. And you're able to continue your husband's legacy and your own, and show that you're not just some dependa, as you say, your own person. And the family does make sacrifices, and I very much appreciate you. Do you have anything for me?
No, I really appreciate you having me on, and this has been a great experience. So thank you for letting me come on and share my story. I love it.
The honor has been all mine, I assure you. Bye, everybody.